I wanted to really examine the bat. Like Corky said, guys, what's the only implement we use in the game when we play 1860s? It's the bat. That's it. We don't have the shin guards, the mask, we don't have the glove. We don't have any of that stuff, We've just got the bat. So, I kind of want to, and believe me, when I ask these questions, it's not to anybody, I'm going to ask rhetorical questions, just not to anybody, but how many really think that you swing a real authentic early 19th century bat? Of course, we all do. But let's look at that a little closer and really see what it is. So, without much going on, I'm going to go into that picture later on some of the bats. But the first thing, let's start to look at really what it is through the rules, regulations of the game and stories of it, and even some video artifacts. We'll take a closer look. Guys, let me say this right from the beginning. I'm not a historian, don't want to be. I'm not Corky and other guys, Eric Miklich and all of these guys, that really study it, but we're going to have a real conversation about this, okay, with bats. I'm leaving a lot of meat on the bone. Have at it, guys. Yeah, I've got the PowerPoint. You can have a copy of it any way you can. Enjoy it. See what it is. A challenge if you want. But we're going to look at that and let's have an open mind and have great discussion. A lot of things start with discussion. I know that over time I've discussed with a lot of people and they said, you know what? He's right. You know what? I'm going to do this a little differently. And I hope that's what happens today. What? No, it's not. Okay. Advance. Okay, I am going to probably turn this down and turn it back on because, let's see here, from the beginning, all of a sudden, did that come back? Whew. Okay. Okay. There we go. So just looking at this, I'm going to have a hard time reading this on there, but surprisingly, one of the few constants in baseball has been the bats. In the beginning, there wasn't much rhyme or reason to the design. Players were responsible for making or obtaining their own bats, in the early days, and there were zero restrictions on size. Whatever they wanted, whatever they did, there was nothing at that time, right? So as a result, early bats were often extremely heavy and long. Are you sure? Nah, I think they were 32 bats, I don't think they know what they're talking about, according to the Smithsonian. Never met the guy. But Smithsonian might have an opinion on that or two. The thinking went that a heavier bat meant more power. Well, they were wrong. They don't know anything about exit velocity. What about bat speed? What about your stance? What do these guys know about baseball? Well, I don't know. They started it. But things have been developed, science and everything else. But right away, what do? We talk to a lot of our people out there in the fields. And, I got to get around. It's too heavy. I'm going to be slow. I'm going to be late on the pitch. Okay. You know what? They thought that way then. Guys, when you go back in history, we got to think, how did they think? Not today, but what were they thinking then? With the splinters in their hands from stoking up the wood stove. Things are a little different, so let's look at that. Some had facets, faces, and others had, the cuff at the bottom, no cuff. Others were so bulky, it was like batting a 2x4. Are you kidding me? You're telling me bats are as long as 2x4s? I don't believe that. Finally in 1859, the restrictions, we know that wasn't 1859, right, Corky? But, but the restrictions about the bat size were put in place, and the most modern bat started to emerge. So I'm not going to read the rest of that, but we get that started, right? So back in the 1840s, long before companies began to manufacture bats, the players actually had to make their own bats, as we just said, working with whatever wood was laying around. I'm sure that a lot of times it was regular poles, this, that, whatever they could do. We know later on we're going to talk about how the A's in the early days actually needed a shovel handle at one point. But axe handles were common, wagon wheel spoke. And the wagon wheel with the striker sticks, they started to call wagon tongue wood because they literally took the spokes off the wagon wheels. That was a great bat. It was made out of hickory, and they would kind of adapt it and then bring it to the ball game and you start to look at what they were doing. So, guys, right from the beginning, big hunk and look, it wasn't just a little spoke. They were big spokes with heavy wood. Now that's in Spalding. I talked to a lot of people. Yeah, I know the Spalding in the 1880s had wagon tongue. They were calling the bat the wagon tongue, and they were making that bat, which was pretty good. By the way, that bat looks a lot more like a Cap Anson bat. Still, I go around a lot of our games. I don't see people using a bat like that. Cap Anson, first guy to have 3,000 hits. Big old bat, big handle. But that's what that was. But the early days of the game, it seems the players would get creative. And it's believed that the wagon tongue wood was used a lot, along with other round woods and useful items. I mean, it was the early wild and woolly pioneer days of baseball guys, what they were doing. And who knows what really used back then. It seems that the wagon tongue was an early grab for its taper and its resilience. So that started it off, a lot of it. But then we know baseball bats have, evolved along with the sport of baseball, changing over the decades for the simple and varied wood sticks of the late 1800s to the modern bats used in Major League Baseball today, as that goes. But, hey, the diameter. We finally get the first restriction, the first rule, comes, it says diameter in 1859, but in 1857, Doc Adams put that together. The first rule was introduced concerning the diameter of the bat. The rule stated that the bat could be no larger than 2.5-inch diameter. Eventually, other rulings changed the maximum diameter to 2 3/4 inch. As of 2010, maximum diameter baseball bats 2.61, and then there's the law Doc Adams wrote. By the way, guys, you like this uniform? I love this uniform.
The belt.
The belt too, isn't that cool? I like that. So I'm gonna take a little detour here, a little up, because that laws of baseball, Doc Adams, and the New York Knickerbockers started so much. What we have done with this is trying to get back to real core and roots of the game with the Knickerbocker experience. This is not called the Knickerbocker baseball team. It's not owned or controlled by any one person, but it's going to be owned and controlled by all of us in the 19th century for the brotherhood of the game, sportsmanship, and the camaraderie. Anybody that loves the game and wants to attain to the original rules in full uniform with no exception. And somebody like Corky's been working with me on that, and he's one of the guys who are helping keep the standards up. And if you wish, we hope that in the future there could be 100, 200 members or whatever, and there might be a festival happening somewhere locally to you, and they could put on a Knickerbocker experience game, and maybe the first 12 that sign up will play in that game, but you get the honor of being part of this club and having this uniform. It's a great thing. So I digress a little bit, but out of respect from the original foundational fathers, I've got this uniform on, and I think that's important. So that was that first limitation was the bat diameter, but then the length. So in 1869, which is 1868, another rule set the maximum length of a regulation baseball bat to no more than 42 inches. Where'd that bat go? Here it is. I keep losing everything. Okay, so 42 inches. So guys, why would somebody have a limitation? Because people go over it anyhow. We'll look at that in a second. 42 inches, they said no more longer than that. And the rule continues to this day in Major League Baseball. Okay, I'm playing for the Yankees and I'm using a 42-inch long bat. Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. Why don't they do it? Well, number one, they're not as strong as us. Number two is they're looking for the different philosophy, bat speed and everything else. But even this is kind of funny. Hillerich and Bradsby bat, the Louisville Slugger, 42-inch star display baseball bat, rare. That's showing a 42-inch bat that was up there, and there's some statistics being sold on eBay. Pretty cool. So there's a big old 42. I don't know how many times it was used, but that's that. Bat handle. The Major League rules also state that the handle of the bat can be covered with any substance or material, such as pine tar. Let's hear it for pine tar. Put pine tar in your bat. That improves the grip of the bat up to 18 inches. I don't know why they chose 18 inches, but you know, sometimes you got to make sure people don't go over the limit on things. Oh no, remember George Brett, the pine tar game? What'd they use? Home plate, because it was more than 18 inches of pine tar. That was just kind of fun to throw that in there. And then even cup bats, some wooden baseball bats have a cupped impression at the end of the bat barrel. You know, we're not going to have that. That's just as it evolves, so going through some of these things. And then in 1893, the baseball rules committed to change improvements of the game. First, it was no longer permissible to use bats sawed off at the end or flat bats for bunting. Imagine a flat bat for bunting. You get it the wrong way, you can pop it up and everything. But that's when they kind of got that all set. It was set at 42, didn't change, and that's when the barrel increased. You know, according to the rule of Gen Reform. So that's just the bat must be round, and we'll leave that. Guys, this is a great book Peter Morris wrote, and I started to take some things out of it. We look at that, and there's some accounts that he has in this book, and you know, there's a lot of things I could see it developing, or we could see more coming out. But I just start off with this because I think that we have to be careful when we look at things in history. As he was writing, and nothing in him, we all thought that the Knickerbockers were stodgy and kind of dusty and crusty, and they took the fun out of baseball. I mean, if you read this, it's like they really took the fun out of baseball because they burdened it with these rules and regulations. So the fun and that free and spirit childhood game was lost. I don't think so. I was talking to Marjorie Adams, and many of you in this room have met her and know her. She was fantastic, and we would talk about Doc, and there was a lot of times he had fun on the baseball field. But you know, back then they were putting a club together. So it's I bring that out to show the balance. Like, you know, I know the great granddaughter of the guy in personal family records, and we start to look at things differently. They did have a lot of fun, guys. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. And that's no knock at that, but when you read things, always try to look a little deeper. You're not just like, okay, well, they put this rule on. They had no fun. They drank, you know, vinegar for breakfast. Okay, how about this? Bases and bats. The only other implements during the early games days, the bats and the bases, were not subject to nearly as much toil or worry as baseballs. What did these guys with baseballs? They think they got it all set. You know, but they were also emblematic from the presiding spirit of resourcefulness and adaptability. Those ball guys, they had it all perfect, but the bats were like, whatever, as it was the early days. I think that I found, and listen, when you see it, you know, in picture, it's got to be true. So the early Knickerbockers, this was their team bat. So every bat was this big in the early days. Even the cat was amazed. Cat can't believe it. See, put that in the report. They were really 6 feet tall. As tall as that guy. Actually, he's 6 3/4, so he's a little too tall. You know, but actually, guys, that's fun. But that's actually my bat. I found it. Somebody found it online. It's really heavy. It's that's a 34-34 bat. I'm telling you, it's proportion 34-34. It's just a little swollen, but it's the right portions of a 34-34 with that. But you know what? Look at this. I'm going to try to read this a little bit because this is great. The sports writer and historian John Gruber nicely captured the analogy with the frontier life with when he explained the batters selected the wood and whittled their own bats. There were stories told of enthusiasts who faced the pitcher with bats 5 feet long. Come on, that's no way. I've never seen any of us play, and we do it accurately. So there's no way that could be right. 5 foot long. I don't know. Anyhow, you know, are you kidding me? Yeah, even 5 foot long, and nearly as thick as wagon tongues. Again, that wagon tongue thing. What happened to the thin-handled bats? I mean, you know, people tell me, you can't prove to me, Pine Tar, that they didn't use a thin-handled bat back then. I can't. You know, they're talking about thick handles and wagon tongue and these big things and 5 foot long bats. You know what? Maybe somebody did have a really thin bat back then. Don't know. But you know what else they did back then? Every baseball player wore pink underwear when they played baseball. You can't prove to me that they didn't. I joke with that guy. It's like, there might have been somebody with a thin-handled bat or something because it was what it was. They could do anything they want. But was it the norm? No. So if we're playing ball today, or we go out today, guys should have mostly bats more like this, most like this, and if there's an occasional smaller one, yeah, they might have had one back then. But yet, what do we do? So anyhow, let's continue on that. It was a happy-go-lucky crowd, these pioneers of the national game, and quite as much in Knesset and the Kerosene were their fathers of clearing the forest. That's kind of blurry for me. That I'm reading it, and this is kind of small right here because it's not so big. I'm clearing the forest to destroy a lot of good bats. That's what it says. With the aim of being to swat the ball out of sight, many batters approached the plate with what George Wright, remember George Wright, guys, with the Cincinnati Redlegs, then the Boston, what George Wright described in 1888 as logs of wood, some of them 3.5 feet in length. He's got to be wrong. That means that bat would be as long as this, and we know that this doesn't exist. But according to George Wright, he said that even 3.5 feet long, right? Back there in life, and fan the air in a way that would seemingly perfectly ridiculous for the average player today. I'm ridiculous. I use a 44-inch long bat because my bat maker cannot make a 48-inch long bat. So I am perfectly ridiculous today. Do you agree, Corky?
More than you know.
The rules were gradually adopted to restrict their length and thickness, but they could still be very large. And it's safe and assumed that the guidelines are not too closely followed. Even then, they were kind of cheating a little bit. You know, you think about Cap Anson's bat. Now, guys, even this bat right here, remember, he was in the later 19th century. Nice bat. And the first guy to have 3,000 hits. And finally, when they kind of caught him, like, you know, this bat, yeah, you kind of cheated a little bit. It's a little thicker than you should. So they busted him down, so you had to make it a little thinner. But he liked the weight, so he made it a little longer. And if you look at his later bat, it really comes out to be this, Joe Jackson's bat, which is pretty cool. And I dare say, when you go to your games and matches, guys, go around. See how many bats players are using like Cap Anson or Joe Jackson. Now, Joe Jackson, we know that he was he wait, 1919. Oh, wait, that confuses me. Now it's hard because if he used this in 1919, why can't we use this, even something like this, when we play games from the 1860s? We don't. We keep going back to what we know a lot of times. So on October 20th, 1865, the Atlantics of Philadelphia scored 101 runs in the morning game and 165 runs in an afternoon game. And in the process of breaking so many bats, they were compelled to use the handle of a shovel as a substitute for a bat until it finished. Could you imagine running around that day? If I'm on that team and scoring 165 runs, I need Gatorade. You know, 101 in the morning, 165 in the afternoon. You know what that tells me? They get stronger as the day goes on. That's how the kind of players they were. But they finished with a shovel handle. Let's be creative. Use a shovel handle today. So, bats were originally viewed as just another implement of the game rather than the player's personal possession. John Gruber explains that the early batters selected the bats they fancied and the teammates would use, and then they started to work it out. But anyhow, that's pretty cool. Now look at this. Here's the Knickerbockers and Excelsiors, guys. Beautiful photo. Some of you guys are leaning up against those guys. Those guys are so supportive way back then. They're even supporting you today. But right here, you look at this. Look at their bats. Look at their bats and say, okay, now I take pride in playing early 19th century baseball. And I take pride in playing the game and playing with bare hands and trying to use an authentic uniform and using real implements. Does your bat resemble some of those? And this guy I'm going to focus on a little bit longer. You know, in some of these bats, they start to come up. Now, I used to think I was 5'9". Keep that in mind. I found out I wasn't. Somebody threw me in the dryer, shrunk. There's, again, the bats. Look at how they are. Baseball 9 photoed right there. and you look at the style and the shape of the bats. And remember, the discovery of 1857, the baseball documents could rewrite history of the game. At the first baseball convention, 1857, the dimensions agreed upon were described again as round and to be no more than 2.5 inches in diameter. I said that before, I just wanted to show you the documentation. It's right there in that area. That was that first limitation on that. And with that, they had some other things that were something, and we're going to show you John Thorne's comment right here in a minute. When Doc Adams set to work in late 1856, none of these aspects of the game were settled, said Thorne. This was some 7 years after Cartwright had left New York for Hawaii. So I was always kind of like, I'm a Doc guy, and I love what Cartwright did, but I was kind of, what did he really do? And then I started to look a little deeper what he did in San Francisco and Hawaii. I got to give him some thumbs up, but let's remember that it was 7 years after that when Doc sat down to write that, according, Thorne had looked at that. But, he was just detailing some of these things, setting it down. But guys, why do we have restrictions? I mean, really, why is there a 65 mile per hour speed limit out there on the highway? That's crazy. You know why? Because everybody drives at 55. There's no reason to have a speed limit of 65. You're telling me people speed? They go over the limit? Never. They would never go over the limit. But wait a minute. There is a reason for speed limits, because people always stretch the boundaries a lot, right? And so we start to have limitations, and you see this right there. Some of the new rules were clarifications of existing. The bat was defined to be round. The Knickerbockers proposed allowing one side to be flat, copying the cricket. But the idea did not make it out of the rules committee. And that was John Thorne. And so think about that. We could have had one side round, one side square. That would have been fun. But look at this bat guy. Oh, excuse me. With the 2.5 inch barrel of bat rule, players began to have woodworkers reshape their bats, or the bat was lengthened for some more mass in him. They wanted it longer for more mass in him, but didn't they know about exit velocity? What about that bat speed? Boy, these guys didn't know what they were doing, did they? Now, wait a minute, guys. Again, let's think of what they were thinking. So when they finally came out with this, all right, well, I can only have it this. Well, let me a little longer, and now I got that weight I'm used to. They were trying to get that big old barrel, hit the ball hard. But you want to be careful with that too. Remember, there was no home run fences. Things were caught in a bound. But hey, it was pretty cool to see that shot. Look at that bat. Again, what kind of bats were they using back then? What did the bats look like back then? I think just like Derek Jeter swung. But this one must have been an odd one. Here's the Newtown Singing Hook from Newtown, Connecticut. My great friend Ray Shaw managed the team up there. It was a great team, talented people, and he was looking through this. He goes, I'm going to have a 40-inch game, and everybody has to use a 40-inch bat. All the players like, I can't do that. I can't swing that. We're not going to do that. And so he promoted it. It's a tapered bat, 40 inches, and you look at the shape and you think about it. They all used it, and it wasn't so bad. Took the fear away, and a few of them kept using the bat. It was pretty cool. I mean, I find it's kind of fun for me after I've learned that. But even that team had done that, and you see the strain. So right around the Civil War years, from 61 to 65, some players found it better gripping the larger bat with wrapped cord or string around the handle. The result was better control. Players started to recognize the benefits of the wrapping effect. The idea became very popular. I actually have one bat, guys, kind of more similar to this, and I've got some jute around there. I call it, all my bats have a name, I call it Grip and Rip. Because in July and August, when it's so sweaty and you're kind of sticky and slimy, even pine tar doesn't give you good grip, but you got that string. It gives me a good grip in the summertime, very much like that. But again, how many bats have you seen like that on our field? How many guys are using bats like that? We might have the occasional one, but again, think about what we're doing, guys. So before the year of 1869, 68, There were no existing limitations of the length of baseball bat. Then in 1869, 68, the rules governing bat length was adopted and stated length limit on bats, maximum of 42 inches long. And this rule is not changed to this day, as I showed you before. And then there's the rule why you can do that. Because I've got a bat that's pretty long like that. Now this, guys, we're showing you these things, and they set the limit at 42. So that, we don't know how long they were. You know, Peter Morris gave examples of this, that, and the other thing. And now even in photos. Now here's our thing. A friend of mine had done this. I think that it's off. I think you will too. But look at the process. At least appreciate the effort and use this consideration for yourself a little bit. Okay, he was looking at an inseam of the pants and 30 inches, and he tried to extrapolate this out, and then he tried to make the bat like this long where the hand is, and he figures 48 inches. But I'm going to go back here and say, where did my Knickerbocker? Oh, wait. Okay. The thing is, though, you see this guy's hand on that? It's like this. So he kind of put the bat here, but there's another couple of the inches if you're looking at the photo where his hand is sitting. I'm thinking that the bat is right up there. It doesn't matter. Guys, remember I said I'm leaving meat on the bone. I'm going to let you look at it. You could disagree. You could say, no, it's shorter than that. You could say it's longer than that. I don't care. I want the discussion to go forward. But at least look at this, guys. You look at that picture. You look at that bat. You look at this. Well, you know the biggest thing, Pine Tar, you don't understand. All the men were 5'6" tall back then. They were midgets. I mean, because every time you try to tell somebody the bat was, up to here. Yeah, but they were short. Okay, well, number one, they weren't really like that. And number two, if there was some guy 5'6" with a bat up to his side, why don't you use a bat up to your side? Well, I used a 34, so I'm going to do that. Well, they also had size 6 shoes if they were that small, and you have a size 12 foot, and you're a manly man that goes with a smaller bat, even though that little man that you claim. But before that's said and done, there's Doc Adams right there. Again, I was joking before and I set this up. Yeah, I'm 5'9". My driver's license says I'm 5'9". Darn, I went to the doctor the other day. I'm not 5'9" anymore. I'm pretty close to 5'8". What, Doc? I've got some back problems and issues, getting a little older, our body shrink a little bit. I'm like, 5'8", oh man. Well, look at this. So I put this bat, here's my belt. 42 inches right to the top of my belt. 42 inches at 5'8". Doc Adams, I remember Marjorie Adams told me he was about 5'11" or so. Got to talk to Marjorie Adams, but right now I got to call her up. She's long distance. But he was definitely taller than me, because back then I thought he was 2 inches taller than me when I thought I was 5'9". So, but now he's 3 inches taller than me. These guys are all about the same. When you look at the photo, they're in a straight line. This guy, when you look at it, it's above his belt, where his belt is, where it's coming up at that thing. So let me get like 3 inches taller, and then put it up there. Guys, I'm not trying to be perfectly historically accurate in this, but I am showing you that bat was definitely longer than 42 inches when you extrapolate that out. Unless they were munchkins. But we know that Doc Adams, his height and everything else. So consider that. Here I am with a 40-inch bat right there to the mid-belt, me standing there, and there's that guy again. Again, 5'8" in his belt. So look at that. Over here I am, I was taking grounds a little bit. That's my 44.5-inch bat right there. And you see it's coming up to about the same spot that guy's coming up. So that's about 44.5, and he's still taller than me. Again, I'm leaving meat on the bone, guys. I'm not trying to be a perfect historian here, but you can see that, start to put it together. Think I'm wrong? Measure me. Think that? I'm sure that it's over there, but Marjorie Adams was telling me the height of Doc, as they knew, the family records. But how are the bats? And again, why aren't we really excited about using bats that they used as much as we could? We don't have to be perfect. We're not going to be perfect, but we can get better. right? Look at this. This is this is another Knickerbocker team from San Francisco. So, Cartwright did do that, but even there, even out in San Francisco and then Hawaii, look at this bat there. A nice taper bat. Here's another one, taper bat. I guess they did have thinner handles. Look at that's a thin handle bat. Quite not what I'm talking about. As you can see, look at the styles that they went with. Okay. Now, guys, although the history of baseball begins in New York, I'm going to pass this by. I wanted to show you what Cartwright had done, bringing this out to San Francisco and then Hawaii, which was pretty great, and he brought a lot of spirit out there. But I'm going to leave that. But you start to look at the pictures because we've got some documentation of the first Knickerbocker team in San Francisco, and this talks about by the way, anybody know where the name Knickerbocker came from? Pretty cool, that original team. By the way, the Knickerbocker experience, think about this, guys. We've all been through here enjoying this game, and we're resurrecting team names from the past and trying to bring the spirit up to today, right? What's amazing, what team broke through to the baseball development that we give it credit in 1845? The Knickerbockers. And yet nobody had the Knickerbocker team resurrected. Awesome. Think about the beautiful situation that left us. We all had these different teams, but the team that started it all, that we've got records on, the team that gave us this classic game, was left alone until we came along. So that's why it's not the Knickerbocker team, it's the Knickerbocker experience we could all share in. Get the uniform, play with passion, play with accuracy. And all of us, as we go through, we'll bring it up, and we'll bring up some of the history of the game and remember these guys in better ways, which is really cool. That's what we're excited about. And even if I might have started it, and if I show up and I forgot my hat, and Corky's not there to borrow it, because this is Corky's hat, because I couldn't get my hat today. Thank you, Corky. So even there, I'm not allowed on the field because I'm not in full uniform. If I forget my belt, no. I'll be a part, and I'll work the bench, and I'll work the stands and help in any way I could. Love the game. But on that day, I better be in full uniform. Black footwear. If you forgot it, if you got Nike swishes, you go barefoot. Other than that, full uniform. Anyhow, the Knickerbocker Cartwright was part of a firehouse in New York City, and the fire engine was called Knickerbocker, so that's how Knickerbocker came to the Knickerbockers, and then he brought it out to San Francisco too. But kind of fun, little sidestep. Guys, talking about bats, I really think that somewhere, somehow, somebody used a small bat one time, and because we could probably, I didn't find it yet, but I'm sure you guys will, a small 32-inch bat or something, then we could use it today. But when we play, how many times do our bats look like this? Look at this game. I mean, if you put that straight up, it's up there. This one's right up to his belt. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Look at these bats. This guy, this long hunking piece of wood. Early photo of baseball guys. Not one of those bats. I don't recognize that kind of lumber on our fields. We're going forward. There's that classic shape, which seems to have been the shape I've come across the most. That kind of look. It's just a good taper bat, long. Here, look at this guy too. It's up there by his belt. How tall is he? I don't know. He looks 5'2" to me. We don't know, but still, it's a pretty substantial bat. It's right here. It's my 42-inch. Whatever height he is, it's what it is. What about this? These bats are way up in this guy's rib cage. This guy's rib cage. My 40-inch is even with my belt. I don't know how tall they are, guys. Again, maybe that's just a 32-inch bat, and those guys are really short. So that means I could use a 32-inch bat today because they did back then. But again, they had a size 5 shoe. And I'm not using a size 5 shoe because proportionally things are different. But look at the lumber they used. Tapered wood again when you're coming through that. Another picture, this guy right here. We don't know so much, but you start to look at this lumber. Look at the lumber that these guys have. Again, even in the conceptual drawing, that's what they understood a bat was back then. I never saw Derek Jeter use that. I think he only used it in practice. Look at the thick handles, the wood on that. Even in these bats, you start to look at that. Again, all tapered bats. Even this guy back here, how tall was that bat? We don't know. And believe me, there's nothing we can say. I don't know where that is, but you know, that bat's pretty darn tall with that guy. Who knows? Maybe that's one of the 5-foot bats. We don't know. Look at this bat right here. Look at how thick these are. Yesterday, me and Corky were at Greenfield Village, came across a storefront that had a nice hat, some bats in there. Those bats had handles like that. And I was saying, thick handles. There were many bats were huge pieces of lumber. You look at that. I'll show you a picture later on in the Baseball Hall of Fame with a bat that looks very similar to that on that team. Again, those bats don't look anything like you're going to see on the field. You know, you start to look at these right here, and even that longer one. All the same shape, all similar. That's why this bat represents the game very good. What's that?
It looks like Johnny Depp might be the captain of that team.
He's in court right now.
Yeah.
There's another San Francisco team. I couldn't really read that, but I could see the bats again, how they work, going through all the same look on the bats. A little clear right here. The Forest City Baseball Club. Look at this freaking thing. I don't know how long that is again. Guys, I'm not going to tell you. I know I didn't do this kind of study, but I could tell you it through pictures and my height and their height and knowing Dark Adams' height, and then we could look at limitations from where they went, and we can start to understand this. And I hope that after this discussion and more, that other people better than me will study this and come out with some bigger facts. We know that there were things Peter Morris did look and find these things in history, 5-foot-long bats and more. I'm going to show you something pretty cool in a little bit too. You look at this. Here's the Lowell team. Very dapper-looking bunch of fellas. Now, what about this? This is the X-Files, and thank you, Corky, on this. From the VBBA website, guys. You know, it's just a little thing. Now, we don't know who this guy is, but I'm just gonna kind of just read from this a little bit, if I can find this. It's number 9. So right here, if you want to go to the VBBA website, right, and start to look at this, and again, who is this guy? We don't know. It's not that everything he says is excellent, and there's another portion I'm going to show you guys. People had missed a couple things. You saw 58, 57, I put in parentheses. I left that up there instead of trying to correct it, show you that there's this discrepancy. Let everybody else figure out the tight details. People like Corky. But here, in the choice of bats, select one rather lighter, light than heavy, this guy says, as you will frequently in matches to contend with very swift pitching. I don't see a whole lot of swift pitching these days, but you know, it's good when you have it. But that's what he was talking about, and the light one. But now in relativity, what was he thinking? When we read that, we think, oh my God, I better use a balsam wood and no more than 30 inches long. That's not what he was saying. But you start to look and he says, have one heavy enough to overcome the resistance of the ball. Because Corky's balls are really heavy, so you need to have a big enough bat to hit them. And practice with one of these bats. And you start to read this guy and the position and method of players selecting and batting, and you start to go, wow. And then he starts to make this better point about the bats and talks about how big they were. And you start to understand that. But that's right there in section 9 off of that. And that's another account. I'm not saying that's the only account. I got a copy or two if somebody wants that. But just right there, there's some more information on bats. Read that with the understanding of the day. What was light? Light to them was probably not a 34-ounce bat. My modern bat that I use today is 65 ounce in a game. So, you know, what was theirs? Another picture of a guy with a great situation. Look at the early Cincinnati Reds, you know, hey, you know, look at that bat. The same thing again, the same style. There it is, you know, the same style. And there's, you know, Mr. Wright. There's that bat. And he's talking, could you believe in the early days they were as much as like a 2x4, crazy going through the wind. But you know what, there's other things, and I'm trying to capture some early bats, and there are some accounts, we got some, it's hard. But this guy, I found this. This guy's about 6'3", and he makes this 54-inch bat look not as big as it is. Guys, well, this must be a joke. It's kind of amazing. Where did I put that And you could look at this later on. This is a bunch of the story of this bat. A friend of mine showed me what was coming down. They've got some samples of it in the bat, a lot of pictures. That this was from about 1859, found in a Pennsylvania farm, and they put it up for auction and how it is. But regardless of that, you look at this bat, look at how it looks again, early bite. Now that guy, he's a midget, so that's only a 34-inch bat. No, he's 6'4", and you look at how big it is. But that same style that I showed you the early pictures, there's one that was a barn find, and you start to look at that. I'll just leave it at that. So my friend Ray Shaw found this years ago, and the article was more descriptive, and that's where I got the more descriptive stuff. You look at that. Guys, 54 inches. Why do we need a speed limit? Because there was knuckleheads that would make them 54 inches. So we limited it down to 42. That's even more than 48. Let me see, it's more than 48, right? 50. Yeah, it's more than 48. Big bats. Having fun. The early days, wild and woolly. I mean, maybe there's not always accounts. Remember, there wasn't a lot of whole, photographs and things like that, documentation, so a lot of history was lost, but we've got some examples we could check in. I want that 54-inch bat, but I can't find anyone who could spin it because lathes aren't long enough. But if I were to get that bat, that would be historically accurate to use, guys. There's that wagon tongue. That's the 1880s. Now that's, again, how many of us out in the field have that? That's the 1880s, the Spalding, wagon tongue. Really came from the 1840s and 50s when they were really getting wagon wheel wood. But we got to be cautious as we go through. And I want to have a little fun and tell you guys, we still have to be careful. There is misinformation. Fake news. Look at this. The first baseball bat was used in March 1 of 1857. It was merely a piece of wood from the forest that was used to hit a ball. At this point in time, baseball wasn't really a sport. Rather a mix of cricket and a game called rounders. So guys, the first baseball bat right there was made in 1857 according to this. Come on, that's great. You'll love the internet. I mean, I Googled it. It must be true. I just put that out there to be guys. Because, look at, prove this stuff. Don't look at, I'm showing you a lot of pictures. Go check it out. Swing what you want. But you know what, if we go back and extrapolate and really go back and look and dig down, we're going to find what I'm showing you. But even there, sometimes you got to watch what they're doing. That's why earlier on when it said, 69, I put in parentheses 68, and 59 when it was really 1857. The doc wrote the rules, started in 1856. I left that there to show you guys, listen, all right, some things would be fuzzy, but we could figure it out. It's not so bad. But this is funny. So you want to see the timeline? Oh, I found this must be true, too. So, right here, March 1st, 1857, the first ever baseball bat made. Corky, do you know that? That means balls weren't made until 1857, obviously, because you can't make a ball with no bat to hit it, right? Anyhow, I just say that because we got to be cautious when we go forward. And proof that baseball bats must have evolved because Darwin in 59, so. Hey, if I said it, it must be true. But all of that said, guys, even that showed you a lot of the pictures of the early bats, and we looked at that, and we got that picture, and got a lot of representation, and they're all, what they were. But even Hillerich, he emerged as the name. Remember that Louisville Slugger. Look at that bat he has. Look at those bats those guys have, the early days. But how did he really come around to it? And I won't go deep into this, but during the 1884 baseball season, John Hillerich, a woodworker from his father, and a good amateur baseball player, was in the stands watching the Louisville Eclipse of the Professional American Association play. During the game, Pete, the Gladiator Browning, the star outfielder, broke his favorite bat. That's tough. And so he went to him. I'm going to just shorten this. And he said, we got to make a bat. So they went together, and Browning refused to slide even. And he was kind of a crazy guy because for time constraint, I'm not going to detail this as much. But he came up with a 37-inch bat, 48 ounce, So it was more really looked like that, guys. That's very similar. And when I went to Louisville factory, you guys did too, it looks like the Joe Jackson bat for the most part. And again, how many of us even use this bat? That's the 1880s. We played baseball by the 1860s mostly. You played bat by the 1880s and people quickly dropped down to like a 32. I exaggerate a little bit, sorry guys, but we should be using something like this. You start to look at the 1880s. What about a King Kelly bat? That's a substantial bat. You know, certainly what he had done. You know, Cap Anson, you start to look at those bats. But even more modern than what the era we typically play, and yet we don't even come up to those bats many times. The next day Browning hit 3 for 3, and everybody said, that's a good bat, so they started to go to him, and it was birthed. You look at the thick handle, the shape of that bat, still doesn't look like most of our bats that we play with. You start to look at this, even that double knobber, the LaJoy style. You know, again, I don't know how tall this guy is, not quite as tall up to his, but you look at the thickness of the bat and the handle again. What do? You know, we're proud when we say, you know, that's a thick handle bat. Yeah, like Joe Torre model. This is a great bat, I think, by the way, the style, the look, and I really do think this is a great bat. But, you know, many times they look like that too. You know, we're still more comfortable with that, but I like that one. It would fit the Gettysburg games for sure. You look at these bats, how they were styled. Again, are we recognizing anything? How many times have we seen all these bats I've shown you? How many times do you walk along and see these guys? We're representing. I'm trying to, you know, Corky's like, Plantar, make sure the brim is exactly, because that's what we could see in photo, and we got to make sure, okay, Paula Weaver, make sure we got this. And if anybody's looking to see if I got a zipper, shame on you. It should be buttons, you know, it's got to be buttons. We argue whether buttons this or huzzah, hurrah, you know, hey, it's really important what you say. How about is it important with what we use with a bat? Huzzah, hurrah. I mean, huzzah was in the Declaration of Independence, pretty cool word. I believe that probably some of them did. I know that mostly they were probably saying hurrah, hooray, and that's cool. It's a cheer. Have a cheer. But when it comes down to my buttons or the huzzah, that doesn't matter to me as much as what are you really using? What represents the game? What are you going to bat with? And that's what you can really share with you. Start to look at these pictures. Again, I have not found a picture that resembles one of our bats that we use typically. Maybe you guys could. I mean, again, truthfully, we joke, but yeah, I can't prove that nobody never did. And you can't prove to me that those baseball players didn't use pink underwear. Just joking, guys. Just joking. Start to see some of these things. Look at these logs. Just that kind of wood. Actually, I literally have a unique bat I used against Jim Bouton. You know, the guy that ball for? And he goes, what's that? I go, you're so old, this is your first bat. It was just a log. Yeah. I said, don't worry, your knuckleball won't hurt when you hit me with it, because I just did a rib shot. But Jim Bouton was a great guy. He kept playing right up until old age, you know. I don't know how many of you know that, playing 19th century baseball, throwing his knuckleball there. And he was a teammate of mine, played in the Northeast. He loved the game. Another bat right there, where we're looking at some of these things. And when you look, you could have access to all that stuff and see what you have and make a better report than me. You know? This was just a clip I showed you before, guys. Just, it's funny. Just, you know, I start to, oh, did it not? Sorry. I take this. This is just Thomas Edison, the very first game in 1898. But even that, I just brought that out for a little fun because we like the old-time baseball, the thought of it. But you start to look and you say, look at, you know, things were a little different, because we got to try to look back, see how people did things. We can't be excellent or precise, but we can start to extrapolate and imagine a little bit of this. Even bats, look at banana bats and ding-dong balls. I'll let Corky take care of the ding-dong balls, but with the bats, you know, they had banana bats too. Pretty cool. They thought it would give a curve and make it come around. They had some fun with bats. Even there, that's pretty cool. I just think that was a bat that I used to use, but I hit the ball so hard that the bat bent. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But what they had in baseball history, fun, guys. I would love to have one of those just to go up there and confuse somebody, because it'd be great. And to show people, look at it. They go, what? They never used a bat like that? Yes, they did. They never used a bat 5 feet long? Yes, they did. What are we representing when we go to bat? Here's a flat bat. Look at that. Yes, they did. I think this was probably just a warm-up bat, but it was a funny picture, you know. They were having a two-piece bat. They were having, there's different patents on bats that were theories, didn't make it, but they were trying, they were experimenting. They didn't have the cookie cutter. Now, guys, yes, this is my game bat. Truthfully, this is my 6-foot bat that I had in the other picture. This is my 42-inch, 65-ounce bat that my friend's holding. That is my game bat for modern baseball. But it even looks small compared to that bat. But I was just having fun. This was a 40-inch. I started with a 40-inch, 44-ounce a bunch of years ago. And then I got to that 65-ounce. And one year I had 409. And they go, how? I go, well, I cheated. Yeah, I cheated. I know, you believe I cheated, right? Absolutely. How did I cheat? I go up there with the 42-inch modern barrel. As a matter of fact, I can't use this bat in our game, guys, because the barrel is too big. Because that's my modern bat. But I go up there and I kind of tap the catcher on the shin. And he goes, what is that? I go, it's a bat. Don't you know what a bat is? That's not a bat. So right away, fastball inside. Why fastball inside? Because nobody with a big bat like that could get around and hit the darn thing. So I cheated. I knew when going up to the plate with a big bat that everything would be a fastball inside. And even if it was, I had enough meat on the handle to fist it over third base or shortstop. They let it out a little bit. I could extend my arms and oh my God, you don't feel a thing with that bat. Beautiful. I just have fun. Modern baseball. MSBL of Connecticut. Guys that have had a cup of coffee and some higher levels of ball. Face some guys, they're pretty much 70s to 80s pitching and stuff. It's a lot of fun connecting with that. But nothing's more fun than 19th century baseball, guys. In the fall, my team, this team, we win the championships all the time. We were in the championship game this last fall, and we had this really great 19th century game at Fort Trumbull. I left my team with the championship game, and they go, what are you doing here? I go, that's how much better vintage is than regular boring ball. But that's what it is. So guys, after all that, how do your bats stand up? How do your bats measure up? I mean, we all think it's good, and I don't ask, but I want to know what you think. What do you use? What do you want to use going forward? What do you want to show off? What do you want to exemplify in our game? I want to kind of show people and somebody and say, you know, here's a youngster or somebody and say, yeah, well, why is that bat? I've never seen a bat really like that. Well, you know, this is what they really did in the early days. And this is why. This is what they did. They were trying to get mass. They wanted enough wood to make the ball go far. Come on, man. Oh, this is exciting. Wow, look, you got a story to tell. But as I've gone through the time, guys, whether it is, look at these bats in general. These are just different bats, but you start to look at them. This is what I find in the field, what you see, the field, the bats. I mean, these are guys that are loving the game, playing the bats. Look at the handles. Every one. Does any of these, right now, any of these pictures look like anything I've showed you so far? Can we find one bat in these groups like we're seeing? Look at all these bats. They're all nice bats. But for the most part, guys, aren't they really the style and shape that we're familiar with in the 20th, 21st century? We're familiar. Does that mean it's the best thing to use in the game? Guys, look at all these pictures. Again. Now here's my bats. When I first started, this was the first bat I was using, which is, I think that was about a 35-inch, I forgot, with the Hartford Senators. But after that, I started learning about bats, and I got the variety, having fun, the tapered bats, the long bats on that, and coming close. But, you know, I got that variety because I was looking at that. But look at this right here. Look at those bats right there, the 19th century room at the Cooperstown Hall of Fame. And look at this bat, Corky. There's that bat from yesterday for the most part. You look at that. That was that picture that, oh, they never had bats like that. I don't know, they put it in the museum. There it is. It's not made up. Yep, okay. I thought it was, I had 2 more minutes to wrap it up. So guys, on this point, when I did that, I'm running out of time, this is great, but I'm talking about batting style right here, and I'm just gonna go through this. When you start to look at this is Cobb in slow motion. I'm not gonna go through that. You can check that out later, some movies, but you look at the split grip. But the biggest thing is you look at Cobb, where they're coming. Honus Wagner, You look at all of these stances. The thing is, guys, I can't, there's Honus Wagner. I can't tell you exactly how they batted back in the 1860s, but I know that from modern player to him, it was totally different. But that's some good stuff that you could look to if you want to get this. Here's Ty Cobb. You start to look at Ty Cobb, how he did. And people say, oh, he always split his hand, he dropped him down. No, he had his hands up here. Sometimes he dropped him down. Sometimes he came up. He was just a magician with his bat, guys. But he didn't bat like today's player. So all I can tell you is I don't know how they batted there. I don't know, but it was embarrassing to strike out. They didn't strike out. They put bat on ball. They did some things. And like what he talks about here is that there was no home runs in the early days. You had to think, you had to make things happen. What are we doing today? We all want to do the softball swing. I mean, it is beautiful to get to the slap hit and everything else. Now this is funny. If you see this, it says caution with the following information. It ain't right, but it's funny and gives a point. And everybody have this ain't right. But they make some funny points. This guy, when you start to look at, he talks about some things that are wacky. Talk about fake news, misinformation, but there's some points you can have fun, and I don't have time to play this, but even there, talking about the home run, and you'll laugh, you'll have fun. If we had time, somebody talked too much, and then I just like that picture, because that's my friend Mule with a cool bat from Pennsylvania area. Joe Jackson, there's that bat early on. Again, how many times do we have a bat like that, and then finish it with Joe Jackson and how he swung, and after all that, the dead ball era, you start to look at that movie, and then there's the cutting room floor. So guys, that's really all we have, at least for this, to go through. Again, I wanted to take some time to really bring this and talk it out and give you a chance to think about it. Let's get out there, have a lot of fun, use what you can, and we're set for today. Time limit. Thank you.